Hello, yes, the Illini guys, Sports Spectacular. He's Brad Sturdy. He's Mike Kegley. I'm Larry Smith, and we're at it again. Another weekend is here. Hard to believe it is already in May. That's pretty cool. Kentucky Derby is coming up. Guess what? We've got a guy who's a racing analyst at Churchill Downs, who's going to come on later on. We talked to him on the Sports IQ show earlier this week. Also, John Costco of Pro Football Focus, with a little NFL draft stuff. The Shedeur Sanders thing, which we'll get into in a little bit here later on in the show, but I want to get his thoughts in terms of just what happened and from an expert's standpoint. A lot of Illini golf coming up, both men's and women's teams in the NCAA. That's on the way as well. But fellas, obviously the big story this week was Andre Stojakovic. He had the inkling last week, Brad Sturdy, that he was coming in, had to dot the I's and cross the T's, if you will. But what does this mean for Illinois to bring in this kid 6'7" forward with 2 years of eligibility left?
Stojakovic is a scorer. He averaged 17.9. I think when I was looking it up, he's the fourth highest returning scorer in high major basketball in the country. I think this is a huge get. This is a guy who can put buckets. His play in the ACC tourney, he had 37 and 20 in the two games in the NCAA or in the ACC tournament with Cal, and he had nobody to go with him. He didn't have guys like Kylan Tomislav Ivasic, etc., who can do other things. Now he's going to have that. He'll get more freedom to move. And you looked at the way Illinois used Will Riley, also the way they used Kasparas Yakashonis. He's a mix between the two guys. Like, he can do the isolations. He's good in ball screens. 25% of his actions came in ball screens. But he can also ISO. You can booty ball him. He can spot up, shoot, space the floor. He does a little bit of everything. So this is a huge get for Illinois. He's going to be one of the primary playmakers for the Illini. And I think he's going to have he may still score 17 points a game, 18 points a game, but I think he'll do it more efficiently than he did before because he's going to have other pieces around him to help. And this Illinois team is going to put up points.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of developmental opportunities for him out there because one of the things that you look at the NBA is a guy's ability to not only be ball dominant, but to include the rest of his teammates. And it's a heck of a lot easier to draft a guy who knows how to make his teammates better and put them in a good position. That's one of the reasons that Tomislav Ivasic is going to be looked at by the NBA because he constantly gets guys the ball and gets them layups, a little bit of the Jokic syndrome. So I think there's a lot he can do on an Illini team that's much more talented than what he has had to develop over the last couple of years. And I really want to see how much better he can get. And this could be a lot of fun, especially when you look at the other pieces that are out there, because they're also going to help him. This is going to be a really interesting experiment, especially in their seeing how much Illinois is going to score.
Yeah, it's one that, again, Illinois, I think it's Ked mentioned, we'll talk with Kedrick Prince here in a little bit about this. He talked with Andre Stojakovic earlier this week in a great story, one-on-one interview that's on IlliniGuys.com that we posted back on Wednesday. But one thing that he's talked about, again, is in terms of just, like Brad said, just you have so many options. Illinois leading the Big Ten in scoring the past couple of years. I think this year, had they hit just a couple more three-pointers, it was the one thing that kind of failed them as the season went on, was three-point shooting. Had they been more of an average three-point shooting team, they would have had the most prolific offense for Illinois since the 60s. That's how well they could score. And this team is much more veteran and maybe even more potent. And one thing I liked about Andre talked about in terms of defense, it's the one question everyone has with this Illinois team is, Brad, can they play defense?
Yeah, it's a legit question. I do think they've added more guys who are older, they're stronger. And Stojakovic has great length. He's a good shot blocker. He's an example. We know Kylan Boswell's an elite defender at the guard position. And I think that the Petrovic kid from Europe, he's a veteran guy. He's 22 years old, so he's not an incoming freshman. He's physically strong. He's able to stay in front of guys, very quick. You throw in you'll have a ton of size up front. You got Ty Rogers, who's a dynamic defender. So, yeah, I think they can be better defensively. And I don't think they have to be like the best defensive team in the country.
That's good.
But they gotta be a top 20 defensive team or so to be competitive at the highest level, as opposed to being the last couple of years they've been like near the bottom of the barrel in national among contending teams. 2 years ago was really bad. They turned it on at times. It was hit and miss. Last year, they were like 45th or something like that. They need to be better than that. And hopefully with the added length and athleticism on the wing, I think they can be better.
It's hard to know who is going to translate one for one in terms of coming from overseas. But I will tell you that Merkovich, everybody's sleeping on him. Now, maybe he's not going to be that good. But he has the one thing that Brad Underwood likes that Illinois fans love is he goes after the ball like it's his. And he does it consistently. And that was why people enjoyed Morez Johnson so much, because it wasn't his smooth offense. And when I watch Petrovic, he's got the ability to go side to side. And I just think that there's a real opportunity here. This team could surprise people, because I think a lot of teams are just going to assume that they're not that athletic. And I'm not saying we're gonna be the Houston team, but they're going to surprise people with how athletic they are.
And Mike, you mentioned Merkovich. He's did the best job defensively in that Nike Hoop Summit on Boozer, right?
Yeah.
Who was unstoppable by everybody else. So he actually stayed in front of him.
Yeah.
And just by playing smart angles and understanding how to play defense. So he's playing against grown men, so he's going to be physically strong enough. And I can't believe that he's not going to, his summer with Fletch summer and fall with Fletch isn't going to make him a little bit quicker and more explosive and he'll get leaner. I think he'd be even better. But yeah, I agree with you completely.
You got some fun matchups with him coming in with, let's say he starts at the 4 and maybe you move Rogers to the 4 at some times. You bring in Big Z off the bench and play the Twin Towers together. Back to Stojakovic, again, if the name sounds familiar, yes, he's the son of Pedro Stojakovic, the longtime NBA star, was an all-star. He won a title with the Mavericks at the end of his career, but played majority of the time with Sacramento. And so, again, this kid coming in from California. And I think, again, one thing that's lost a bit is that understand where Illinois is right now as we enter Brad Underwood's 9th season this fall, that the national champion Florida Gators made a run at him, and the blue blood North Carolina Tar Heels were in his ear, constantly trying to get him to come down and visit, whatever. Despite all that, and even though there was some internet chatter over last weekend, Illinois was the one that they blew him away on the visit. And so Illinois beat out the blue bloods, and we're seeing that more and more. Where Illinois, for Will Riley, for KJ last year, for Morez last year, for Terrence Shannon. These are guys that were wanted by Kentucky and Michigan and Duke and North Carolina, and yet they come in. So I think that Illinois fans need to step back from one and understand that this is not the 2000s or the 2010s. This is a different era right now, and Illinois can go up and compete and win these recruiting battles against the very biggest names in college basketball.
No question. I completely agree, Larry. If you go back if you remember back in the day, Bill Self, and he used to recruit guys across the country. And I remember a lot of these guys turned out to be great. Some of these guys were not as great. Some of these guys that he got were obviously good. D. Brown, Darren Williams, pretty good. But he also missed on a ton of guys. And he said, if you're not missing on guys, then you're not recruiting the right guys because you're not aiming high enough. Illinois is recruiting at that level. Now it's in the portal, it's different, but they're recruiting at the level that Bill Self had them recruiting at. And so it's been 20 years in the making, but here we are. And now you've got an opportunity to maybe make those runs that they made back in the early 2000s to Elite Eights and Sweet 16s and Final Fours.
And I'll split hairs with you here, but I don't know that it's that much different. You need to get difference makers, and you just have a new tool, the portal, which wasn't available at that time. And Brad Underwood has proved one thing is he is willing to use the tools that are available to get players. And he doesn't seem to care. He'll take a guy out of high school like Will Riley. He'll take a guy from Europe. He'll take a guy from another school. And to me, I've always thought that was crazy when we saw over at Clemson that Dabo was like, I'm not going to use the portal. And think of a carpenter if he came into your house and said, I don't use nails. I screw everything in because I don't believe in nails. You would be like, what are you talking about? You should use the right tool for the job. And I think Underwood is underrated in his willingness to say, you know what, I'm going to use the right tool for the job. And if it's a new tool, I'll figure out how to use it. Brad, you and I talked to him at the IlliniGuys golf tournament a couple of years ago about what he was going to do in the portal. And every year it's evolved a little bit in how he's managed it. I think that's what you expect from a coach who wins 20 games plus every year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think that you'll remember that 4 or 5 weeks ago, the big name was Josh Dix, right? The sharpshooter leaving Iowa, was flirting with Illinois, wound up really, sounds like it was Creighton all along. He was playing some games here. But Illinois fans are disappointed. That's one thing, too, that Underwood, assistant coaches Orlando Antigua and Jeff Alexander, by the way, say their names 3 times. These guys literally traveling the world to bring these guys in. And if a kid goes somewhere else, they just pivot. And so all of a sudden now you get in a Stojakovic who is taller, is a better scorer, more athletic than Josh Dix. And you bring in the Petrovic kid from Serbia, like you said, the point guard, Mirkovic coming in, Big Z. You look up all of a sudden, you're going into May with still some time left on the clock to try to get some guys in before summer. And this roster is looking pretty good.
No question. The Illinovic, Chief Illinovic, the Illinovic guys, I don't know what we're going to call them, but this roster's good. There's so much front court depth. And I think a lot of times we pigeonhole guys. We say, oh, this guy can't do this or this guy can't do that. They've got so many pieces, and you're not going to play more than 10 guys anyway. And they've got 10 guys who can provide a legitimate role, I think, right now, 10 or 11 guys who could fill a role. And maybe Jason Jackson's role is only the third center. But my goodness, that's a pretty good third center. If he can just defend and rebound and give you a couple minutes here and there, that's exactly what you need out of that position behind Big T and Big Z. And you've got depth at the 4. You've got lots of things. I really like this roster. I think it's good. And I think they can do some really good things once they get it all figured out how they're going to play with these guys.
Yeah, I totally agree on that.
Yeah, no question about that. We're going to talk a lot more about the Illini basketball coming up. Again, Kedrick Prince is joining us. He's the director of recruiting for IlliniGuys.com. Talked with Andre Stojakovic, as I said a moment ago, in an interview that is on the front page of IlliniGuys.com. By the way, again, it's not too late to get in there. A free 7-day trial. Jump on that while it lasts and get a chance to kick the tires and come on in. So much drama still in the offseason as we're getting into starting to get into the high school recruiting process as well. There are 2 freshmen in the class of 2025 coming in, Keaton Wagler and Brandon Lee, and we'll ask Ked about him as well. Coming up next, we'll talk a little golf right here. The Illini men, oh, what a weekend it was in Baltimore. I know it's painful, but we're just going to jump in, rip off that scab, and talk about it as we get ready for NCAAs for both the men and the women. We're just getting started. It's a great weekend. Hopefully you're having a good time. Glad you're with us. It's a Sports Spectacular here on the Illini Guys Radio Network.